Always in our minds, we should not be thinking whether we should favor this political faction over that political faction. Our true principles are the people who are powerless, who face government on a daily basis, and who see the corruption daily. It is not a political faction over the other. Your Honors, Your Excellencies, mga kasama, mga kauban, kakadwa nga nagkapo itinaduma-duma nga ili, fellow seekers of justice. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Warmest greetings of a just and lasting peace. Isang mapagpalayang umaga sa ating lahat. Thank you again for your invitation. Last December, I spoke to this institution about corruption and the need to remove erring officials from our ranks by establishing efficient processes. I return today with an emphasis on reform, something that concerns our offices as well as the entire government. Luckily, corruption is now being openly discussed, fueled by years of disservice to our people. Corruption eats at the core of who we are as a people. Our growth as a nation is crippled and stunted by it, testing our resolve and our ability to do good, honest work. We should not address these issues with quick cosmetic solutions, but rather take on the difficult work of understanding the root causes and, from there, identifying ways to achieve real, sustainable change. We cannot confront the problems that plague our institutions without examining its foundations. Unfortunately, our history, in a large way, is shaped by patronage politics and regulatory capture, which keep our country mired in poverty and enthralled to oligarchs and strongmen. Even as we speak, the complex symbiosis between some businesses and government power, which leads to skewed anti-poor policies and enables the laundering of huge amounts of money, still needs to be addressed. For many who are powerless, the government has sadly become synonymous with time-consuming, irrational, bureaucratic processes, and worse, corruption. This is the opposite of our mandate in public service. Our duty as public officers is to acknowledge that we are flawed while remaining open to adapting and changing for the better. Ask any motorist. When you talk to them about people doing traffic or police persons, they will tell you that they are afraid. Ask anybody who applies for a driver's license. And in fact, ask anybody who engages the court system. They are fearful of having to do what is not in the law. For many years, Philippine courts have borne the burden of delays and inefficiencies. I imagine the Office of the Ombudsman has been affected as well by delays and inefficiencies. This is a challenge we at the Supreme Court have chosen already to confront. In addition, we know that every sphere of life is now being reshaped by digital systems. The Supreme Court is no exception. We are mindful that the practice of law inevitably evolves under the pressure of technological change. In its own sphere, legal discourse does more than merely respond to technology. It shapes and sets its boundaries, determining what can be allowed, what should be regulated, and what must be refused. We have combined our problems with delays and a lack of transparency with the opportunities for digital transformation. We are almost done. We adapt and evolve to keep pace with technological advancements, treading carefully between neglect and hypervigilance. Digital transformation is not simply about automating existing processes. It is about rethinking how justice is delivered, considering the opportunities and risks posed by technology. It is about re-engineering our courts and institutions, modernizing processes, and reshaping institutional culture so that justice becomes more timely, more transparent, and truly accessible to all. Technology should be a tool that helps us deliver justice efficiently and effectively. This is precisely what the Supreme Court envisioned when we adopted the Strategic Plan for Judicial Innovation 2022 to 2027, or otherwise known as the SPJI. Launched in October 2022 under the leadership of Chief Justice Alexander Gesmundo and with the full support of every magistrate in the court and bank, the SPJI is the Philippine judiciary's roadmap for transformation, anchored on 4 guiding principles. Timely and fair justice, aimed at strengthening the adjudicative system central to the judiciary. Transparent and accountable justice, designed to reinforce the judiciary's moral and ethical foundations and rebuild public trust in the judicial system. Equal and inclusive justice, focused on expanding access to justice for all, especially those historically excluded or marginalized, and technologically adapted management, aimed at embracing and integrating modern technologies to improve access to justice and the court's efficiency and effectiveness. SPJI is pursued through 3 strategic goals: efficiency, innovation, and access. To reach our goals on innovation, the SPJI set 5 objectives. First, modernizing our court processes. Second, strengthening ICT governance, management, and opportunities. Third, promoting the effective use of data in policymaking. Fourth, upgrading information sharing across the justice system. And finally, capitalizing on artificial intelligence for legal research and court operations. We have already rolled out nationwide a full transcription program that can be done almost real time. And we have also in the agenda of the bank a full governance framework on the deployment of AI ethically in the judiciary. One of our most active efforts towards innovation, and perhaps one of our most ambitious initiatives under SPJI, is court modernization. Right now, as I speak, the court and the entire judiciary is implementing eCourt PH 2.0, which we have already shortened to eCourt PH, which envisions a judiciary in every stage of the judicial process, conducting its operations digitally. Our target is, by the middle or 3rd quarter of this year, you will be witness, as you are witnessing now, fully digitized courts. Fully paperless courts, except for initiatory pleadings, and I will explain why later on. eCourt PH aims to address the problems we have encountered in paper-based systems, particularly the delays in court procedures caused by physical document handling, issues with filing pleadings, transmitting records for appeals and motions, and serving documents on the other party often lead to prolonged case resolutions, ultimately resulting in delayed justice. By digitizing the complete process from filing to adjudication and service, and providing real-time updates on case statuses, lawyers can work more efficiently, hopefully alleviating their clients' suffering promptly. Transforming to a digital system helps minimize delays, making the judicial process more transparent and equitable. We will be fully paperless by the end of this year. We hope that the Ombudsman systems can keep pace with our digitalization efforts. And with your current leadership, I am fully confident that you will. eCourt is divided into 5 components. Component 1 focuses first on the electronic filing and service of court documents in all civil cases across the Our goal for electronic filing is to ensure that the filing with the court occurs at the same time as service to the other party, making it instant. Part of our considered served as soon as they receive the filing in their email inbox. We have successfully launched this first component last year by implementing our electronic filing measures under Rule 13-A, known as the Interim Rule on Electronic Filing and Service of Pleadings, Judgments, and Other Papers in Civil Cases. Effective December 1, 2024, electronic filing is now the primary mode of filing pleadings in civil cases, except for initiatory pleadings, for the simple reason that we need to still issue summons. And the way to acquire jurisdiction on the other party, in accordance with Rule 14, is to tender a physical copy of summons together with the complaint. So for complaints in civil cases, we have required hybrid, meaning to say digital and a paper filing, so that our courts will not be the ones to print out the copy of the complaint. As I speak, throughout our archipelago, every law firm, when they want to have a civil case initiated, and in all civil cases throughout our courts, MTC and RTC, they have to do all filings and service that may motivate some in the executive and legislative branches. Our terms have a long-term vista, one that should not be anchored in the result in the political fray. Elected officials, on the other hand, though elected to better represent the interests of their constituents, have often proven otherwise. You know what makes a difficult case? It is not the difficulty in the principles and the law. It is the difficulty in what the result will be. Because we know that if the result favors one politician over the other, we will always get the ad hominem attacks from everyone out there saying, because this is the result, you coddle this person. Whereas in truth and in fact, if you look at the principles, it is there for a reason. And it is there in order to maintain the rule of law and justice and for the long run. Okay. So I guess you also have that feeling. Because once you choose who to prosecute first, sasabihin nila, bakit siya nauna? Hindi ito. So kinakadal nyo yung hinuli ninyo. But in reality, you can only do some things initially and then go to the other. And some cases are more difficult to evolve and develop than the other. So I am confident that you here in the Ombudsman know what I mean. To be appointed allows a modicum of freedom from the current systems. We are given the privilege of thinking long-term and planning reform for the duration of our service, much like the SPJI. In theory, this unique position releases us, or is supposed to release us from the anchor of short-term politics. The office and the Ombudsman and the judiciary are responsible for bringing to justice those who violate the law, ensuring vigilance against abuse of power. We don the cloak as arbiters between the people and the justice system by guarding against impunity. The ordinary person cannot directly go head-to-head against these powers, which is where our duty comes in to tip the scales of justice in favor of the oppressed and marginalized. Always in our minds, we should not be thinking whether we should favor this political faction over that political faction. Our true principles are the people who are powerless, who face government on a daily basis, and who see the corruption daily. It is not a political faction over the other. Officials have been caught in corruption cases, signaling the need for intervention by institutions such as ours. Recent events have revealed the need to further strengthen our institutions, streamline our processes, and prevent delays in the administration of justice. Our role as vanguards of justice is now more than ever apparent, and we are called to respond at a crucial time in our justice system. However, we acknowledge the factors which still weaken our independence. Appointed officers might become beholden to their appointers, fostering a sense of obligation. This impairs their judgments. I would always say, after you are appointed by a president, after you are appointed by the person that appointed you, your duty now is no longer to the appointing officer, it is to our people. Let me just share with you one of the first votes that I cast after having been appointed by President Pinoy was to cast that deciding vote, saying that President cannot remove a Deputy Ombudsman. Gonzales versus Executive Secretary. I reached the court, 7-7 sila. And I think they were thinking I would vote in favor of the administration that appointed me. That was one of my first votes, to vote against the administration for me. By the way, that case is also still very relevant to you. Gonzales versus Executive Secretary. Then there is the expectation, even within the judiciary and perhaps in the ombudsman, that when you are appointed, na dapat kayo nakakausap. To be nakakausap, ideally, means that the judiciary or the ombudsman can provide accessible justice to litigants, always listening to the burdens of those marginalized by the existing system. Ibig sabihin, dapat nakakausap kayo na mahirap. Sasabihin sa inyo, ang hirap po dito, ang tagal po namin, nakakulong kami, hindi namin ma-afford yung bail, ang tagal-tagal po yung schedule ng calendar. Yun po yung nakakausap. We weigh the scales of justice, not just by the law, but more importantly, by social justice. However, there has always been the temptation in the halls of power that nakakausap means giving access to those already who are powerful. And that's the bad way that nakakausap tayo. Our original independent position within the framework of checks and balances is compromised by this factor. We are made vulnerable to the machinations of corruption that loom over other departments of government. Being aware of this, we must take stock of the powers vested in us, not by those who appointed us, but by the people whom we serve. Then there is the politics of fear. Fear is a powerful tool for getting people to do what you want. Almost synonymous with power itself, fear has been wielded by some to influence the actions of the masses, their allies, and enemies alike. We are turned against each other through fear-mongering, sowing discord and paranoia among even the best of us. The way fear works is simple. It targets an innate insecurity in an individual, our deepest motivations, our families, affiliations, affairs, desires, our tenure in public office, all of which can be brought to light through shaming us, can trigger fear. Fear as a political tool manufactures instability, threatening either our individual or our collective positions. For some, this means the fear of being stripped by the legal titles that we have, the power, the prestige, and the privileges that we enjoy. We see the politics of fear at work when political figures shy away from speaking truth to power because their allies might revoke their positions. Far too long have we been invested in our indebtedness to those who have brought us to where we are in life. Some bend over backwards to accommodate these patrons, turn a blind eye, and facilitate the ejection of political rivals. This should no longer be the case. We are indebted to no one except the mandate of our office. We are not accountable to the appointing power or the present administration. The powerful are not our principals. Our principals are the voiceless, the powerless, the Filipino people, long suffering from the abuse of the powerful. The rule of law should be the rule of social justice. What must be legal in our hands must be what is just. This is not to say we ignore present realities. I have spoken extensively about the need to interpret the law in context. The law is not a monolith to be followed blindly. Its text, a codified norm, and like all texts, must be read against the social, historical, and political factors that produce it and that continue to support it. Contestation of dominant views that have not worked for everyone, not the mythical deliberative consensus of the anonymous few, is the foundation of democracy. Contestation and challenge is the foundation of democracy. Law and its interpretation should be the product of that contestation. Our Constitution embeds the words social justice as one of its important principles alongside democracy. Social justice should be elaborated in every case we decide and every case that you file. It often requires that we not deliver on the short-term political expectations of those who consider us their allies. It may be that social justice, the result required to favor the vulnerable and the marginalized, may be a decision or a position that goes against the interests of those in power. It may be that the requirement of social justice requires you to judge your demise as a public officer. That may be possible. While we hold public trust, we must always be aware that the power entrusted in us is temporary. We must not fear losing it if doing so means we have done what is right. The moment we believe that our task is to prolong our tenure in office, regardless of whether it will address the liberation of our people from oppression and abuse, we will become lost in a false rhetoric fueled by paranoia and grandiosity. We become slaves of the greedy. We must understand, however, also that we are not here to be saviors of the masses. Instead, our role is to understand the narratives of those who suffer and to enable and empower them. We are only as good as the work we do in raising the consciousness of the people we serve. Our work is to help them recognize their latent power. For the judiciary and the ombudsman, this means always improving this concept of access to justice. The people do not need a Messiah to save them. That is impossible. EDSA 1 and EDSA 2 taught us that there can be no Messiah. People power should remain people power, not a legitimization of a faction of the elite using the rhetoric of democracy and people to further inequality and disempowerment. Tulad nga ng palaging sinasabi ng iba, walang magpapalaya sa atin kung hindi tayo mismo. Walang magpapalaya sa atin kung hindi tayo mismo. Hindi presidente, hindi savior, hindi Messiah. Taong bayan, organized, demanding of us that we do our jobs. This is where we begin dismantling the politics of fear. When we look beyond our positions and titles and focus on the work of empowering and enlightening our people, we become safe from it. We become ready for our own demise. We accept that we will not be remembered as heroes. We accept that our legacy is to lessen the suffering of our people, even if we are not remembered. Our goal is liberation, not remembrance. I repeat, our goal is liberation, not remembrance. What we need now are state persons, statesmen, who are not swayed by immediate political pressures. And we need leaders, not demagogues. We need wisdom, not viral posts. We need leaders who live their principles, not those who live for memes. The times call for leadership that invites critical thinking rather than fear, decisive decision-making rather than rash action, and genuine service rather than self-serving public statements. We will never be fully immune to the politics of fear or the temptations of power. There will be moments of weakness, and as humans, we will slip. This is why we need to be inspired by those we work with. We need to be reminded that being critical does not mean being psychopaths. Sa Tagalog, mga sipsip, to those whom we are indebted. We must leave behind our fear of being unmoored from our positions, sacrificing in turn our duty to our people. We must have the courage. Serving our people well with intention and purpose is difficult. Doing what is right and just will often displease the status quo. I will repeat. Doing what is right and just will often displease the status quo. If we live under injustice, then it should displease them. That displeasure will invite a propaganda of shame to be directed at us. I know. I have been there. I am still there. You should know. You have been there. You are still there. They will do their work. Our response should be to do better. Doing better, we contribute to unmooring the foundations of their greed. Doing better, we will lessen our own people's suffering. If that be the price of our service, then so be it. The key to a fuller understanding of our roles is simple. Our titles and our power are not for us. It is not about us. It has never been about us. And therefore, we should aim never to only be remembered. Finally, I leave you with two further ideas that have inspired me. First, the worst emotion to feel at the brink of death, and this is very important, to think about that moment that you died. The worst emotion to feel at that brink of death is regret. Regret means that we live in the present, hoping that we have done better in the past. Regret is best addressed by realizing the privileges we have now. Regret can be avoided by being critically aware of the consequences of choosing convenience right now over discomfort, even though we know that discomfort leads to what is right for others. Do not let regret be the legacy that you leave. Serve with integrity while we still can. Choosing to do nothing or choosing what is convenient but not just is a political act. It not only causes injustice for our people. If we do that, it is the cause of injustice. At some point in our careers, many of us are tempted to simply be quiet. We grow tired. We grow comfortable. We tell ourselves that someone else will speak, that someone else will act, that this is not our fight. But silence is never neutral. It is permission. Remaining silent in the face of corruption, especially when we hold office, authority, and voice, is complicity in injustice. Silence is not prudence. Silence is not humility. Silence is injustice. Second, I again emphasize that the titles and masks we currently carry are transient. We will be forgotten, and the chase for attribution and remembrance of who we are is a fool's journey. What is important is that we know, when we are alone and forgotten, that our lives have mattered, that we have not only lessened the suffering of another human being, but also contributed to a society where all have the capability and the ability to achieve a meaningful life, not like what we have right now. That we have contributed to truly meaningful freedoms. Let us do what is right. Let us do what we can. Our people still suffer. Our people still suffer under our watch. We will not fail them. We cannot fail them. Agyamanak, maraming salamat. Thank you. Shukran.